Welcome to the UAC podcast. It's Joseph Johnson, as always, hosting with author and my mentor, Dr. Michael Yessis. Doc, thanks for jumping on with me again. How you doing? Everybody's still locked down, so hopefully this is about to lift here soon. But in the meantime, we've got some podcast time that we can use. So, Doc, this week I wanted to talk about something that you and I have, talked about probably ad nauseum, but just something that is interesting. Trend. I won't say trend, but like you're seeing in the field, kind of like what we were talking about, the lack of progress made in the field, or the lack of a field in general. What we do see a lot of now is a lot of complicated stuff in terms of, especially in the monitoring area where they're tracking the athletes. There seems to be a real lack of simplicity or, some logic, if you will, on how the body works, and then how do you prescribe things. When did you see that change? Because it seems like it's changed in the last, 10, 20 years. When did you start to see that kind of change?
That's a good question. I think I saw the beginnings of it at least 20, 30 years ago, which kind of surprised me when you hit me with that question. When did it start? But see, I'm going back to one of my books, The Explosive Running. Even at that time, people were telling me, coaches were telling me that, hey, this is too simple. It's got to be something wrong with it. And they were getting impressed with books that I know they didn't understand. And when we talk about the book, I say, well, what did you get out of it? And, they had no response. But yet it was a great book. I really learned a lot. Give me an example. There weren't any. So it's like they were, becoming experts. They thought they were becoming experts by reading these books and whatnot, but they weren't. They were falling further behind, and they were making it more complex instead of simplifying things. Because we know training an athlete is very simple. But why the heck do we make it so hard? And I think a lot of coaches think it's got to be hard. It's got to be difficult. I don't understand it, but that's why it's good. I don't know where this comes from, but that's what I think is happening.
I made this observation to Dr. Mann, I don't know, maybe a year ago. We were talking about this, and after I was watching some, I think some lectures and watching some discussions online, and I told Brian, I said, it seems to me like your field is mainly just working to impress each other at places where they go speak and things like this. Like, this is what they live for. This is what the goal for them is, to present and then to impress their friends or other PhDs, not really to actually concern themselves with the result given by the athlete. So it's become my kind of thought that this no longer in many ways has anything to do with the athlete. It has to do with showing everybody how smart you are. It's become probably more ego based than anything. And all science is based, to whatever degree. Every scientist, his reputation is that's the center of what he does. Obviously, there's an ego involved, but I think what happened there was the Russians had, the great Russian scientists had enormous egos too. But the difference is that they had to achieve the objective of helping the athlete first. Then the ego came with it. Now it's more of, I just want to impress everybody with what I know and neglect the athlete along the way. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. So you mentioned explosive running as being an example of this, and also the 1x20 book and idea has been really hard for people to get a hold of, that it could work, and it's not what they've heard before. And what I've told people is that the approach that you've taken to this, there's an elegant simplicity to it and especially with the 1x20, you looked at all of the major objectives of that particular time frame in the beginning, the general phases. You want to build endurance, you want to build strength, you want to build better technique, you want to build great blood flow to the area to protect against injuries, and they all got accomplished with one set of 20, and not some complicated formula, I guess, or algorithm. When you're looking at a problem, or you're looking at an objective, and you are trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I do? Well, or how are we going to approach this? So what's on your mind? Like when you wrote, the running book, or when you looked at 1x20, what's on your mind as you're going through the process of developing what you're actually going to do, what the plan's going to be?
All right. It goes back to the concept of what makes a great athlete. See, to me, there are only two factors that are involved. See, that's what makes training so simple. You have to focus on the physical development to develop all of the physical abilities that are needed to succeed in executing the skill. And that's the second one, skill execution. If you work on better skill execution, you can have a better athlete. You work on the physical factors directly related to the skill execution, you can have a better athlete. There are no other things. These are the only two things you need. And we try and bring in these other factors. Oh, we have to do training on this. We got to train this. We got to train that. We got to train. It's like training has to be all these different things. No, it should only be one thing. Make an athlete better. When you talk about a great athlete, let's say a quarterback, take a Tom Brady. What made him so great? That he could run fast? That he can smile pretty? Or that he can throw the ball? And the better he can throw the ball, the better the athlete he was. So there's your skill execution. And you take other quarterbacks today, like from the 49ers, he's a scrambler as well as being able to throw the ball. So that's another skill he's adding. So, and today it's just getting to be more common. The better you can execute the throw, the more you can scramble, the better the quarterback you are. Now, what's going to make him a better scrambler? Well, you got to work a little bit on his technique of cutting and running, quick acceleration, deceleration. All these factors come in. So sure, there's the physical, there's the skill. Let's develop the physical in relation to the skill. There's nothing else.
It is interesting, when you say that, and this is something that I, repeat to the athletes and coaches as well, is that what are we trying to get done exactly? What do you want the athlete to be able to do? I tell them, my job is to take the order. So when you bring an athlete to me, you tell me what do you want him to do? Well, he needs to do this, but okay. Once I know what we're doing, then we apply the means to that. So if you have to nail something into the wall, you need a hammer. If you need to cut the wood in half, you need a saw. And if it's a project that requires multiple tools, you have to know when to apply the tool at the right time, on the right situation, in the right dose. But it is complicated in the sense that, like with the 1x20 or one of the some of the other things that you put forth, there's a complication factor to it, but you took the complicated and made it simple so the person could use it, instead of drowning them with a bunch of scientific jargon and things of this nature that they don't understand anyway and have no real reference point for. You took the important pieces and said, okay, here's the plan of what you're actually going to do. And it included all the science, but it was just in a very straightforward manner. And I try to do the same thing with athletes is like, look, here's the exercises you need to do. Here's the sequence you do them in. Report back to me next week and let me know how it's going. because we might need to change it, but we're going to watch and see your progress. And if you keep progressing, then we're on the right track. Simple. I mean, it's not any more complicated than that.
Right.
And you know, we hear all these things of, you know, I mean, they're looking at things 6 ways from Sunday, and I've said this like in the physical therapy area, and yet everybody's getting injured at the same rate. Gotten really complicated, but everybody's still getting injured at the same exact rate. What do you attribute this? Because it feels to me like the field is stuck in the mud. What do you attribute that to?
I don't know if I really have an answer to that, but I have to go back to what you were saying. I think you were right on. And let's take a look at the 1x20. A lot of people say, "Oh no, that can't work." You know, that we got to do this or that or the other. Well, if you're going to teach somebody how to swim, you just throw them into the deep end and say, "Go, babe," or do we teach them a few things on how to float? You know, and then some of the progression of strokes and so on. So in science, we know we got to start slowly. You don't just throw them into the deep end. You know, a lot of people talk about this. This is how I learned. I doubt if you learned that way. Maybe 1 out of every 100 learned that way.
Right.
By getting thrown into the deep end. So we know from science, you got to start off gradually. You got to start off slowly. Gradually increase it. And we know that the fewer the repetitions you do, the greater it's going to be the strength. The more repetitions you do, the greater the muscular endurance. So here's a program that does both. You're getting high intensity, you're getting low intensity. So this is why the program totally is moderate. So it's based all on science. It's not guesswork. Gee, I just went to sleep one night and I woke up and here's the program. Now, you have to take a look at what is known, what has been proven, and then applying it. See, and we stay away from this. Somehow this seems to be too simple. You know, many people take courses, you know, the kinesiology majors, take courses in motor learning, and then they forget everything. Well, motor learning is part of the basis for the 1x20. This is how we learn. But we leave all of that. Oh no, that class, that has nothing to do with reality. It has a lot to do with reality if you use your brains and put it to work. But everybody's looking for the magic, the secret. What's the golden grail here? There is no golden grail. It's very simple. And it takes understanding. Like you mentioned, the explosive running book. Now I have many sequence pictures in there that I took from digital video cameras. Camera that shot up to 1/1000th of a second. So very clear. I got all the pictures in order. And I had coaches tell me, "Oh, you just copy these. You just, you know, pose them." And how can you pose pictures like this? It's impossible. Or, you know, they just disagree with it rather than looking at it and saying, "Wow, I never realized that." This is what most coaches that know what they're doing respond. This is how they respond. So, yeah, it's a combination of things. I wish you weren't.
I think from what I've observed is that there hasn't been a concerted effort to grasp what's already been done.
Mm-hmm.
So they read the books, and I hear this a lot, all the books people read. And I'm like, well, how come you still aren't getting any results then? I mean, that was the point of reading the book, right? I mean, if a book doesn't result in some change in what you do, and that change also results in an improvement, you absolutely wasted that time.
Mm-hmm.
There's no point in reading if you haven't applied in a practical, valuable way for improvement. So I think that once again, this is another one of these things where they want to impress each other. Oh, I read 35 books last year. But if you still suck, it doesn't really matter. I mean, so what? You wasted a
What separates an elite, world-class athlete from everyone else? Their genes make them quicker, react faster, and more explosive. What if there was a way to, in a sense, turn on those elite athlete genes in the average person? Recent advances in genomic research and sports nutrition have proven this is now possible. Introducing Myosin by Nootromic Sport Nutrition. Multiple studies show it increases quickness, explosiveness, and strength. In most cases, your vertical increases by at least 1 inch an hour after it's taken. Through a proprietary blend of ingredients, Myosin in effect flips the switch on those genes that make you jump higher, run faster, and lift heavier weights. Here are several Myosin testimonials.
This is Daniel Stokes. He's a sprinter. What was your best time before we started training this season with Myosin?
21.5.
And what's your best time as of today?
20.7.
Could you explain to us what the fast twitch muscle supplements done for you, Myosin?
It made me more explosive. It helped with my reaction time off the ground, bring my knees up quicker, and I continually progress.
This is Matt Tomey, head strength and conditioning coach for football and men's basketball at Michigan Tech. If you haven't tried Nootromic Sport Nutrition's supplement Myosin yet, you're definitely missing out. I've had athletes here try the supplement and really enjoy the benefits, including an immediate improvement in vertical jump of about 1 inch. Myosin really stands out with its ability to improve power output, speed, reaction time, even potentially quick decision making. If you haven't checked out this unique supplement yet, go ahead and pick up a bottle of Myosin and give it a shot and just see for yourself.
Here is lead formulator Rick Brewer's brief explanation of Myosin.
Myosin evolved out of the neuroproteomic research we conducted starting back in 2005 to nutritionally boost the speed strength traits of well-trained athletes. These speed strength traits could include things like reaction time, starting power, maximal speed, quickness and agility, and also fine motor skills. Double-blind placebo studies as well as many outcome studies have been conducted on well-trained athletes from many sports and of many ages. The results of this research have shown a sizable boost in muscle contractions as well as the synchronization of these muscle contractions during speed strength activities.
lot of time on something you either don't understand, you just read it for the sake of reading it, or you read it for the sake of being able to tell people you read it. I see that a lot. A lot of people like to tell you they read the book. No idea what it's about. And I find this to be very true.
If I can interrupt you for a second there, I had a few people tell me this, and the more I thought about it, the more I agree with them. They said, your books are not for reading, they're for studying. See, and I think this plays into it, and what you're saying here.
Absolutely.
You don't just read the book, it's not a novel.
Right.
You know, that you can skip pages and still get caught up to the story. But it's something that you have to study and think about. Hey, how does this apply to what I'm doing? Is this going to work over here? See, your mind's got to be engaged as you read the material.
And yeah, reading it multiple times, like going back, I've done that before. Go back and realize there's something that you didn't even realize was in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't remember even seeing that before. And
right.
Like something's a process that you're looking at is complicated and you can't figure it out, and you go back and look at the book and some of the answers might have been there all along and you just didn't get it at that time. And I found this to be the case too, that your grasp on what you were told 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the grasping of it doesn't happen at that moment. It might come in stages over a period of time where you start to better have a full handle on what that meant. And especially when you're reading from, some of the more complicated books, like Super Training or something like that. Those are not easy books to read, and you're not going to grasp it right away. It's going to take years, or some of the other books that Bondarchuk have written. They're not easy books to read. They're meaty and dense. So I think that's part of the thing. People would just want to be able to say they read it instead of grasping it, because if they grasped it, you would see a better relationship than back to their actual work, which we, as we talked last time, it's not really improving. So what's going on here? We've published a lot of great books in the field, and you see some changes, but not nearly what you would expect.
Right.
Not nearly what you would expect. So I want to go way back with you on this one, because I think this is an important thing and maybe valuable for other people. When you first started reading the Russian stuff, which has been over 60 years ago, at the beginning wasn't simple for you, and you were a PhD student. How long did it take for the light bulb to even go on?
In different aspects, at least about a year. See, like, for example, technique analysis or analysis of an athlete. The Russians in their track and field journal, and these were journals directly related to the coach. They were for the coach to read, not for the average person. So they always had cinematographic pictures, sequential pictures of an athlete running, or maybe throwing or jumping, one of the track and field events. So I would look at it, and here I had a biomechanics background, thought I understood technique, and I read the article, and they say, now notice in frame number 4, he's doing blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at it. I didn't see it. Then in frame so-and-so, this is happening. I didn't see it. And I thought I did, but see, my eye was not trained to see these things. And it literally took me at least a year before the proverbial light bulb went on. And then, oh, that's what the heck they were talking about. Now it became clear. And from there on in, it was smooth sailing. But it takes a while. So you may read something, you may see something, but when does it really kick in? Like you were saying, well, when can you apply it and do something with it?
And this happened for you in stages too, over the course of your whole career, where you encountered newer stuff. I know that you said when you went to the Soviet Union to visit, they were talking about stuff, and you were like, I don't know what these guys are talking about exactly.
That's right.
And obviously you didn't want to put that out there right at the moment, but it was this is after you had many years in the field. And I think this goes back to something that you and I talked about many times. There's a real lack of mentorship in this field, where you have to be able to maybe read something you don't understand it. You got to have like some form of a mentor, somebody who's been a lot further along that understands the material, and say, what did they mean by this? What does that mean? Because I mean, you and I've done this for 26 years. It's like, well, that's not relevant to your situation. Here's why. Or, yeah, that's an idea, but it's for further down the road. It's not right now. You got to remember who he was writing for, having context to who the author is. Veroshansky writes very differently than a lot of other authors, and you have to have context for that. Because if you don't, you're not going to understand it. You have to, you have to get your head around that. And so, this is why I have a hard time with people who look at your books and say, well, they're too simple. That's a godsend, because I actually can understand it and apply it in a real, rational, logical way. Like, it's not a big problem. I know, okay, out there still got questions, but at least you got a framework where you can kind of, apply everything properly. And I think that this currently the field, this rush to, I don't want to say rush maybe, but this tendency towards being complicated is more about being revealed as not knowing. So if you talk in real complicated terms, it's hard for other people to not know whether or not you know what you're talking about, because they don't either. And and no one, it's like, look at the birdie, because if you look at their work, you see, well, nothing's really changing, nothing's improving. So that's what you should be judged on anyway, right? But they keep this distraction out here of all the complicated things that they're thinking about or worrying about, and off on tangential information. So I think that the critical point here is that if you can't explain it to a sixth grader, you don't understand it either. You've got to be able to explain it to someone who knows nothing about the field, and they can pick it up and go use it. So when you talking, like 1x20, for example, special strength exercises is another area of your expertise. And it's something that people, I think, overcomplicate. And I'm going to preface my question with this. People will say, well, some movements like, hip, let's say, for example, hip flexion, it's not really, it's not that big of a deal, in running. I don't know. You can't duplicate the forces maybe, and all these different things. But here's the funny part, is that the squat really actually is less specialized towards running than, let's say, hip flexion. And so what we say is, well, you got to squat, and which I agree you do. You need to squat and all the different things to get faster. No problem there. But the next question is, well, then the hip flexors are involved, right? And that's the way that, the hip flexion, that's the way they contract. Why would you not do them? I don't understand what your objection would be. I understand maybe you don't understand it completely, but I don't understand the objection to it by somebody who's educated. That makes no sense at all. Now I'm going to hand it to you.
All right. Just on that point, let me give you a good example. The hip flexors are driving the thigh forward and driving the thigh backward, as in pullback. This uses 80% of all the energy used to produce force in running. The other 20% comes from the ankle extension. See, if you take a look at the mechanics of running, sure, the knee is bent and then the leg straightens. But as it straightens, the body's moving forward. So as it's moving forward, it's not applying force. If it did, you'd be jumping. So here you are on the ground, your center of gravity is lowered. And if you're going to use that leg extension, you'd be jumping up. But you don't want to jump up. You want to keep it horizontal. So there's a classic example. From science, we know what takes all the energy. These three factors. And that's why they're the three most important factors to improve speed in running. That's why, and I think you'll agree with me here, you've been doing the exercise for years. The exercise I created with the active course on a knee drive and a pullback, you get great increases in running speed.
Oh, yeah.
See, so this is for real. It's not like, hey, just get stronger. That doesn't mean anything. Just getting stronger is going to make you slower in running. But get stronger in the actions that are used in running. Now you're going to increase speed. And as you were talking, I started thinking of one of the reasons why there's so much confusion in the field and people don't understand. We, as the Soviets did, we do not separate the levels of athletic performance. Excuse me. Like the Russians had different classes, class 1, class 2, class 3, and so on. Well, this showed you how good an athlete the individual was. Here in the United States, all athletes are one athlete. And many of the studies are done with, let's say, a high school athlete, and then they use the results of what they got with a high school athlete with the professional, or vice versa. And usually when it's disparate this way, this is where you get injuries, or you don't, it's really disastrous to the athlete. To use the training of an elite athlete or a professional athlete and use it with a beginner or a low-level athlete. So it's about time we said, now, this athlete is on this level. This is the type of training he needs. This athlete's on this level. He needs a different type of training. See, and even with some of the books, like the Explosive Running book, go back to it again. It can apply to a high-level athlete and a low-level athlete. But for a low-level athlete, you only take a few key areas that you want to work on. The higher-level athlete, we're looking at more of the finer points. See, so all the information, once you have it all, you have to know what to use for whom and when. See, then you're going to be more successful.
So, I mean, there's a bunch of different things that we get into on that. We'll come to that later. But I guess the key point is, don't let something that seems so simple, don't let it fool you. It can be simple and profound at the same time.
Right.
And most things in life, as you get older and wiser, you find out most things aren't that complicated. You just made them complicated. And maybe you're not seeing what's staring you right in the face. And so I can say that I know for sure, with certainty, that, looking at, special strength movements, and this is funny too, because they were also promoted by Dr. Veroshansky as well in a lot of his older books, special strength exercise. This isn't like some new concept. And Bondarchuk advocated them. He had his own set of specialized movements for throwing. You saw this a lot in many different areas. So it's not like a new concept at all. How it hasn't been adopted is beyond me. And it's not like a risk. People talk about it as if there's some risk involved. The only thing that can happen is the athlete could get better. There's no downside to it. It's not like some things you might commit to. You say, well, we don't want to do that because that could be, risky for an injury, or maybe that could inhibit their progress. At the very worst, special strength exercises of that nature could only be benign. That could be the worst case scenario, that they don't add anything, but they certainly aren't going to hurt anything. And further, they're going to prevent injury nonetheless. Because if you're training everything else and kind of leaving the hip flexors, for example, to chance, they'll eventually get hurt. I mean, that's just a fact. And if you don't use hip extension or the glute ham over time, your hamstrings eventually are going to get hurt if you're running a lot. It's just part of the picture. But if you are strengthening those muscles and those movements the way that they actually happen in the sport, you're going to cut injury down to almost none. And I could say I've never had a hamstring problem in 26 years. Never, with any athletes.
Same here.
So that's pretty, I think that's a pretty good number, pretty conclusive, if you will. So and also the results that we've gotten in terms of athletic performance improvement, really not comparable to anybody else. I know most everybody in the field and observe, a lot of them. Nobody gets better. I've never seen anybody get a better result, than what we're getting over a sustained period of time, not just one, snippet of time, like 3 months or 6 months, but I'm talking like 5 years, 6 years, years into it, still getting a really good result. So yeah, I think that's sad, but that's the state of affairs right now. So I think the message for everybody here is, look, go back and reread anything that you've read by people who are competent, highly competent. Reread it and then read it again, and maybe 3 or 4 times, and ask questions, about that text, because there's things there that you are missing. I know from my own experience. I read something, totally miss it, come back to it a year later. Oh, wow, I can't believe I totally forgot that, or I didn't even see it. And maybe sometimes you didn't see it because you weren't ready, like you didn't have the background, knowledge to see what was right in front of you. Because I could put my books in front of my kids and it's worthless to them.
Sure.
But 10 years from now, then it would make sense. Same idea. So, Doc, we're gonna wrap this up, but give me your parting thoughts on this one. How do we look at if somebody's getting started in the field, they just got their degree, they're getting out into the field now, what do they do? How do they start?
That's a tough question. And I have to think in terms of what their education was. See, are many of these certifying agencies really doing a good job? See, I don't know of any, for example, that teach technique analysis, that put up sequence pictures and say, okay, now analyze what this runner is doing incorrectly, or what can we do to improve his performance? I could be wrong, but I don't know of any. So if they're not covering that, what can we expect of the coach or the new coach? Now, they learn a lot about strength training, but typically it's one kind of strength training. Well, you got to do 3 sets of 10, and you got to do X number of sets. Let's say 3 sets. There's no understanding of, look, there are different kinds of strength. They all require different types of workout routines. You got absolute strength, you got absolute concentric strength, you got absolute eccentric strength, you got absolute isometric strength. Then you have limit strength. Most coaches probably say, limit strength? What in the world is this? Well, how strong can you be with the use of drugs or other, enhancement products? So, explosive strength, speed strength, strength speed. What are the differences between all of these? So part of it is their education. They're lacking in the basic knowledge needed to do a good job. So their job is tough. And they learn, most of their learning is about strength training. So when they go out in the field, all they know is strength training. They think this is what's going to make a better athlete. But as we know and we've experienced, it can make a better athlete, but can also make a worse athlete. See, here's what's not brought out. Strength is good. Yes, it's good, but it's also bad. And that's typically because it changes technique. So, I can go on with this, but for them to do a better job, and this is what I've told some of the coaches that have come to me, forget about what you learned. Start from scratch and just look what you've learned by working with me or, mentoring under me, and go from there. And then the same thing with you. You have coaches that call you and ask you questions. Well, now you really want to get better. You got to duplicate what I do. Maybe not duplicate is the wrong term, but have to do some of these same things. So you have to learn the total picture, not just what strength training is. So I can kind of go on, but I think.
Yeah, I mean that nails it, Doc. It's number one, forget what you learned. So, number two, start identifying who to learn from, or how
Right.
to, the great sources of information. And I think we both agree that the former Soviet Union is a great place to start. And then with your material in combination, you're going to get a well-rounded spectrum of information. And then you have to remember what you're doing. You're training an athlete to get faster. Well, how does that happen? If that's what you're trying to do, how does that happen? And that can be a little bit complicated, but you've got to take it into understand what the main components are that are simple, and then start applying the right tool to the right situation. And I realize it's a little bit of an oversimplification, but just getting stronger only works for a while. There's a lot of different things that only work for a while. So you have to, there's a lot of context that goes with it. But Doc, thanks a lot. I appreciate your help. Memorial Day weekend, we're going to pull this one a little bit short, and hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend. And I'll be talking to you next week.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Joseph. And I hope you enjoyed it also.
Thanks, Doc. I appreciate it.
Right on.